For 12 years, Darius Cole showed up. Every early morning dispatch, every late-night system failure, every holiday weekend when the warehouse ran short-handed, Darius was there. He was the kind of man Harrington Logistics built its reputation on. Steady, dependable, invisible in the way that good workers always are. He never missed a deadline. He rarely missed a meeting. He missed everything else. On the morning he was called into the regional director's office and told the promotion was finally his, the title, the salary, the corner office with a view of the city he'd spent a decade serving, Darius Cole said thank you, set his badge on the desk, and walked out. By sundown, he had packed 2 bags, loaded his 9-year-old daughter Maya into the car, and pointed them both toward Lake Mercer, a town he had sworn at his mother's funeral he would never return to. Then the next morning, when he opened the front door, he stopped cold. The woman next door, clumsily trying to fix a broken fence post with both hands, was Evelyn Harrington, his company's CEO. Neither of them knew what the next 90 days would bring, or how completely those 90 days would change who they were. If you're new here, this channel is where we tell stories about real choices, quiet courage, and the moments that change everything. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Darius Cole had a system for everything. The alarm went off at 5:15, coffee brewed while he showered, lunch packed by 6, Maya's backpack checked twice, homework, water bottle, the small stuffed bear she still refused to leave behind even though she was 9 and insisted she was too old for it. He dropped her at school by 7:10, arrived at the Harrington Logistics Dispatch Center by 7:30, and didn't stop moving until sometime around 8 or 9 at night, when he finally sat down in the apartment and realized he hadn't eaten since noon. He had been running that system for 12 years. It worked in the way that machines work, efficiently, consistently, without feeling. Darius was good at his job in the way that men who have nothing else to fall back on tend to be. After his wife Renee died in a car accident 6 years ago, work became the thing he understood. It had rules. It had outcomes. It didn't ask him how he was doing and then go quiet when he answered honestly. Maya was the reason he kept the system running. She was also the reason the system was slowly destroying him. She was 9 years old and sharp in the way that kids are when they've spent too much time around adults, noticing everything, saying less than she knew, watching her father the way you watch someone you're afraid might disappear. She drew constantly. Notebooks, napkins, the back of her homework sheets. Most of her drawings were of the same place, a wooden house beside a lake, with a porch and a garden and a tire swing hanging from an oak tree. She had never lived there. She had only seen it in photographs and in the stories Darius told her about his mother. He had promised to take her someday. Someday had not arrived in 3 years. Evelyn Harrington did not have a system. She had a schedule, which is a different thing entirely. At 41, she ran Harrington Logistics the way her father had taught her, with precision, with distance, and with the understanding that people in her position could not afford to be liked. She had taken over the company a decade ago and tripled its revenue. She had also, 18 months ago, authorized a restructuring that eliminated 312 positions across 4 regional offices. The press called it ruthless. The board called it necessary. The people who lost their jobs called her something else. What no one called her was a victim. That word would have felt absurd to anyone who looked at Evelyn Harrington from the outside. She wore it well, the composure, the tailored suits, the flat expression in board meetings that made junior executives forget what they were about to say. She had built that exterior carefully over many years, and she had needed every inch of it. What she had not anticipated was her half-brother. Grant Harrington was 4 years younger, charming in the way that people are when they've never had to work for anything, and had spent the better part of the last 2 years quietly positioning himself to take the company from her. Not through performance, not through merit, through a manufactured financial scandal, falsified loss reports, manipulated shipping records, a paper trail designed to make Evelyn look like the architect of a fraud she had never committed. The board had received the preliminary findings 3 weeks ago. Evelyn had known it was coming for longer than that. She had said nothing publicly because everything was still in legal review, and one wrong word could collapse what little defense she had left. She had shown up to every meeting, signed every document placed in front of her, and given no indication that anything was wrong. Then she had driven to Lake Mercer alone in the middle of the night with 2 suitcases and no plan. The house next door to the one she had rented belonged to the Cole family. She knew that the way you know things about a town you've only visited once, as a child, before everything changed. Her own mother had grown up on that street. The house Evelyn had rented had been her mother's, sold after her mother passed, changed hands twice, sitting empty now for the better part of a year. She had not told anyone where she was going. She had not expected a neighbor. She had especially not expected that the neighbor would be Darius Cole, 12-year employee, the man her operations team had quietly flagged as someone who might be asked to testify in the internal investigation. She recognized him the moment she saw him at the fence the next morning. She had seen him twice at company-wide meetings, and his name had appeared in 3 separate internal reports in the past 6 months. She knew exactly who he was. The question was whether he would recognize her. He did, immediately, and the look on his face when he went still told her everything about how he felt about it. The call came at 11:14 on a Tuesday. Darius was in the middle of signing the paperwork for his promotion when his phone buzzed on the desk. He didn't recognize the number, but the area code was the school district's, and that was enough. He picked up before the second ring. The nurse's voice was calm in the practiced way that school nurses are calm. Careful, neutral, designed not to alarm. Maya was fine, she said, not hurt, but she had left her classroom without permission and had been found sitting alone in the medical room, and they would appreciate it if someone could come. Darius was in his car before she finished the sentence. He found Maya exactly where they said she would be, sitting on the narrow cot in the corner of the medical room, back straight, feet not quite reaching the floor. She was holding a folded piece of paper in both hands. When Darius came through the door, she looked up at him with the expression he feared most from her. Not anger, not tears, but the quiet, careful look of a child who has already decided not to expect too much. He sat down beside her. "Hey, talk to me." She unfolded the paper and handed it to him without a word. It was a drawing. The wooden house by the lake, the same one she had drawn 100 times before. But this version had 2 figures on the porch. A man and a girl sitting together doing nothing in particular. Just sitting. Darius stared at it for a long moment. "They said you're always working," Maya said. Her voice was even. That was somehow worse than if she had shouted. "They said you never come to anything, that you're always somewhere else even when you're home." "Who said that?" "Kids at school." She took the drawing back and folded it again along the original creases. "I told them they were wrong, but then I thought about it and I didn't know what to say after that." Darius opened his mouth and closed it again. He thought about the recital he had missed in October because of a freight audit. He thought about the parent-teacher conference he had rescheduled twice and then attended for 11 minutes before his phone pulled him back out into the hallway. He thought about every night Maya had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for him to come home, and he had carried her to bed without waking her because it was easier than having the conversation. "I don't need more money," Maya said. "I just want you to actually be there." She wasn't crying. She was 9 years old and she was stating a fact, the way you state a fact when you've turned it over long enough that it no longer hurts to say out loud. That was the part that broke him. He went back to the office. He walked past the regional director's door, past the conference room where the promotion paperwork was still spread across the table, past the assistant who called after him asking if he wanted to reschedule. He went to his desk, opened the bottom drawer, and took out the only personal item he kept there. A photograph of his mother standing in front of her house in Lake Mercer, squinting into the sun, one hand raised against the light. He had told himself for 3 years that he would take Maya there when things settled down, when the workload eased, when the timing was right. He understood now with a clarity that felt almost physical that the timing was never going to be right. He was going to have to make it right himself. He typed the resignation letter in under 10 minutes, left it on the director's desk without knocking, returned his badge, cleared his locker, and was back at the school to pick up Maya by 2:30. She looked at him when he came through the door. "You're early." "Yeah," he said. "We're going to Lake Mercer." She searched his face for the catch, the asterisk, the way adults say things and mean something smaller. She didn't find one. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Start packing tonight." For the first time in longer than he could remember, Maya smiled at him like she believed him. He was going to make sure she kept believing him. They arrived at Lake Mercer just before noon. The house was smaller than Darius remembered, which was something that happened with childhood places. They shrank when you came back as an adult, as if the years had compressed them. The white paint had gone gray and was peeling at the corners. The porch steps sagged on the left side. The garden his mother had kept immaculate was overgrown, the flower beds buried under 2 seasons of dead leaves. Maya stood in the driveway and looked at all of it with wide, serious eyes. "It needs work," Darius said. "I like it," she said immediately. He carried their bags inside, opened the windows to clear the stale air, and spent the first afternoon pulling dead growth from the garden while Maya explored every room in the house with the focused energy of someone conducting an official inspection. She reported back periodically. The upstairs bathroom had a crack in the tile. The closet in the back bedroom smelled like cedar and old paper. There was a tire swing in the backyard that still worked. She had tested it thoroughly and could confirm. By evening, the house felt less abandoned. Not fixed, but occupied. There was a difference. After dinner, Darius went out to look at the fence running along the property line. Several posts had come loose over the years, and the whole section on the north side leaned at an angle that suggested it would not survive another winter without attention. He crouched down to check the base of the nearest post, testing the wood for rot. He was still crouching there when headlights swept across the neighboring property. He stood up slowly and watched a black car, expensive, out of place on this street, pull to a stop in front of the house next door. The house had been empty for months. He knew the property had changed hands recently, but hadn't thought much about it. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. Even in the low light, even across the distance of 2 yards, he recognized her. He had seen her twice at company-wide town halls, the ones where she stood at the front of the room and spoke in complete sentences without notes, the way people do when they have rehearsed something so many times that the rehearsal has become belief. Her name had been on the internal memos, on the restructuring announcements, on the termination notices that had gone out to 312 people on a Tuesday morning 18 months ago. Evelyn Harrington looked the same as she did in every company photograph, composed, dressed like she had somewhere important to be. Except that she was standing alone in a dark driveway in Lake Mercer with no one to help her with the single bag she was pulling from the trunk. And there was something in the set of her shoulders that did not match the composed expression at all. Darius did not move. He stood by the fence post and watched her unlock the front door and go inside. And he told himself it was a coincidence. People had second homes. People took leaves of absence. It didn't mean anything. He went back inside and said nothing to Maya. He found out about the electricity the next morning. Maya was the one who noticed. She had gotten up early and gone to sit on the porch with her sketchbook, and when Darius came downstairs, she told him, with the gravity of someone delivering important intelligence, that the lady next door had been sitting outside since before sunrise and didn't look like she was sitting outside on purpose. He looked through the kitchen window. Evelyn was on her porch steps, still in the same clothes she had arrived in, her arms crossed against the cold. She was not reading. She was not on her phone. She was just sitting there with the rigid stillness of someone refusing to admit they were uncomfortable. "She looks cold," Maya said. "She's fine." Maya considered this with the particular skepticism of a 9-year-old who has already made up her mind. "She doesn't look fine." Darius got his coffee and did not look out the window again. 20 minutes later, Maya appeared at his elbow holding the spare blanket from the hall closet. "I'm going to take this over," she said in the tone she used when she was not actually asking permission. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the blanket. He thought about 12 years of termination letters and quarterly reports and the particular silence of the dispatch floor on the morning after layoffs, when everyone came in and no one said anything because there was nothing to say. Then he thought about what he had told Maya the day before, about being present, about showing up. He took the blanket from her hands. "I'll go." Evelyn answered the door on the second knock. She looked at him. She looked at the blanket. Something moved across her face that she controlled almost immediately. "Mr. Cole," she said. "The circuit breaker's probably tripped," he said. "Box is usually on the side of the house in these older properties. I can reset it." A pause. "I didn't ask for help." "I know," he said. "I'm not your employee anymore, Miss Harrington. I'm your neighbor." He held out the blanket. After a moment, she took it. The circuit breaker was exactly where Darius said it would be. He reset it in under 2 minutes, checked the heating unit while he was at it, found a loose connection in the secondary valve that would have caused problems within the week, and fixed that too. He did not ask for permission before fixing it. He simply fixed it, the way a person fixes something that is broken when they have the means to do so, and standing around discussing it first seems like a waste of everyone's time. Evelyn watched him from the doorway with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Thank you," she said when he was done. The words came out slightly stiff, like something retrieved from a shelf where it had been stored unused for a while. "Pipes under the kitchen sink are going to need attention before the first freeze," he said. "Probably the week after next, based on the forecast." "I'll call someone." "All right." He picked up his toolbox and walked back to his side of the fence. He did not look back. He did not offer anything further. He had done what needed doing, and that was the end of it. That was what he told himself. It did not stay the end of it. The pipes under the kitchen sink needed attention 4 days later, not the week after next, because the forecast had been wrong and the temperature dropped overnight. Darius heard the sound of someone attempting to shut off a water main at 7 in the morning and failing, which produced a specific kind of knocking sound that traveled clearly in cold air. He was at Evelyn's back door with a wrench before he had consciously decided to go. After the pipes, it was the roof over the back porch which had developed a leak. After the roof, it was a section of the front steps that had cracked and needed to be reseated before someone went through them. Each time Darius came, fixed the thing, and left. Each time Evelyn thanked him with the same careful formality, as if gratitude were a transaction she was completing correctly, but had not yet found a natural way to perform. He told himself he would have done the same for any neighbor. He told himself it didn't mean anything particular that this neighbor happened to be who she was. Maya was less complicated about it. She liked Evelyn in the uncomplicated way that children sometimes attach to adults who are clearly struggling. Not despite the struggle, but almost because of it. Evelyn did not perform warmth the way some adults did around children, talking too loudly and asking too many enthusiastic questions. She spoke to Maya at normal volume and took her seriously, which Maya found refreshing. When Maya mentioned at breakfast that she had a school presentation coming up on women in leadership, Evelyn offered to help. Darius started to object, and Maya looked at him with an expression that closed the conversation before it opened. He let it happen. He watched from the kitchen window 2 afternoons in a row as Maya sat across from Evelyn at the porch table. Both of them bent over Maya's notebook. Evelyn did not talk down to her. She asked questions more than she gave answers, and when Maya said something sharp or insightful, Evelyn wrote it down as if it was worth keeping. Maya came home both evenings in high spirits, full of things she had learned and opinions she had formed. Darius found this harder to be suspicious of than he wanted to. The difficulty was that proximity kept producing moments he hadn't prepared for. One evening, he was replacing the boards on Evelyn's front porch steps. She had finally stopped objecting to the repairs and had started leaving him coffee on the railing when she knew he was coming, which was its own kind of progress. When she came out and sat on the top step with her own cup and didn't go back inside. They sat in silence for a while, which should have been uncomfortable and wasn't. "You're not going to ask me why I'm here," she said eventually. It wasn't quite a question. "You'll tell me when you want to," he said. "Or you won't." She looked out at the lake, visible between the trees at the end of the road. Most people would have asked by now. Most people didn't watch their colleagues pack out their desks because of decisions made in your building. He said it evenly, without heat. It was a fact, not an accusation. But it landed in the space between them and sat there. Evelyn did not flinch. She did not apologize or explain. She looked at the lake and said nothing, and Darius respected that more than he expected to. "The coffee's good," he said after a moment. "It's the same brand you use," she said. "I noticed." He glanced at her. She was looking straight ahead, expression even, but there was something at the corner of her mouth that was almost a smile. He went back to the porch boards and said nothing. But he stayed until the job was finished. The Lake Mercer Harvest Fair happened every October on the grounds of the elementary school. Food stalls, a small auction, a raffle for the kind of prizes that only made sense in a town this size. Darius hadn't been since he was a teenager. Maya had never been at all, and she approached the whole thing with the systematic enthusiasm of someone who intended to experience every part of it in the correct order. Evelyn came because Maya asked her to. Darius had not objected, which surprised him slightly. The three of them walked the grounds in the early evening, Maya moving between the stalls with her list, Evelyn slightly out of step with the informality of it all, too upright, too careful about where she stood, like someone who had read about county fairs but was encountering one in person for the first time. Darius found himself pointing out things she might not know, the way you do when someone is clearly trying and you find yourself wanting to help them not try quite so hard. It was almost comfortable. It lasted about 40 minutes. He heard the voice before he saw who it belonged to. "That's her!" The words came from somewhere to his left, low and certain, and the tone of them changed the air immediately. Darius turned. A group of men near the auction table had gone still, all of them looking in the same direction, looking at Evelyn. He recognized two of them. Marcus Webb, who had run the overnight dispatch team for 7 years before the restructuring. Dale Foster, who had driven long-haul routes for Harrington Logistics for over a decade and had been let go 4 days before his pension fully vested. Good men. Men Darius had stood beside, covered for, shared bad coffee with at 3 in the morning when the loads ran late. Marcus stepped forward. "Evelyn Harrington." He said the name like he was setting something heavy down. "You have got to be kidding me." Evelyn turned. Her expression did not change, but Darius watched her go very still in the way that people go still when they are preparing to absorb something. "You know what my wife said when I told her I lost my job?" Marcus said. His voice was controlled, but only just. "She said we'd figure it out. You know how long it took us to figure it out? 18 months. 18 months of figuring it out while she worked doubles and I drove for a delivery app and our kids pretended not to notice." A few people nearby had stopped moving. "I'm sorry," Evelyn said. 2 words, quiet and direct. "Sorry," Dale Foster repeated, not mocking, just turning the word over. 300 people and you're sorry." Darius stood between them without having made a decision to stand there. He felt the pull in 2 directions with equal force. These were his people, the ones he had fought for in every quarterly review and every union grievance meeting, the ones who had trusted him to be the person in the room who remembered what the numbers on the spreadsheet actually represented. He had sat across from some of these men on the worst days of their working lives. But he was also looking at Evelyn, and he was seeing something that didn't match the story he'd been telling himself about her for 12 years. She wasn't composed. She was holding herself together through something that looked, from this distance, a great deal like pain. The confrontation might have ended there, uncomfortable and unresolved, if one of the men in the back hadn't said it. "You were asked to testify." He was looking at Darius now. "The internal investigation. They asked you to provide records. You never did." Maya, standing just behind Darius's left shoulder, went quiet. He felt her go quiet more than he heard it. "That's not the whole story," he said. "What's the rest of it?" He didn't answer because the rest of it was complicated and this was not the place, and he could feel Maya's eyes on the back of his neck, and he knew that whatever he said next, she was going to be turning over in her mind for a long time. The group dispersed eventually, slowly, the way confrontations in small towns disperse. Not resolved, just suspended. Darius found a quiet corner near the school fence and crouched down to Maya's eye level. "I'll explain everything tonight," he said. "I promise." She nodded, but the careful look was back on her face, the one that meant she was already processing and had questions she wasn't ready to ask yet. Evelyn found him later near the parking area while Maya was saying goodbye to a girl from her class. "You should know," Evelyn said without preamble, "that I didn't authorize those terminations because I wanted to. I authorized them because the alternative, according to the numbers I was given, was full insolvency within 18 months. She paused. "The numbers were wrong. I know that now." Darius looked at her. "Why were they wrong?" She held his gaze for a moment, then she said, "Come to the house tonight after Maya goes to sleep. There's something I need to tell you, and I'd rather only say it once." He thought about saying no. He thought about Marcus Webb's face. He thought about the way Evelyn had stood there and taken it without deflecting, without lawyering, without doing any of the things a person with her resources could have done. "All right," he said. "Tonight." Maya was asleep by 9. Darius checked on her twice before he went next door. An old habit, the kind that had started in the first year after Renee died, when he would wake at 2 in the morning just to stand in the doorway and make sure she was still breathing. Maya had long since stopped needing that kind of checking on. He did it anyway. Evelyn had left the porch light on. She opened the door before he knocked, which meant she had been listening for him, which was the first unguarded thing he had seen her do. She had changed out of the clothes from the fair and was in a plain sweater and dark jeans, and without the armor of a professional setting, she looked closer to her actual age. Tired, careful, holding something tightly behind her eyes. She poured coffee without asking if he wanted any. He sat at the kitchen table and waited. She stood at the counter for a moment, her back to him, and then she turned around and said it plainly, the way you say things when you've rehearsed them long enough that the rehearsal is worn away, and what's left is just the truth. "My half-brother Grant has been setting me up for 2 years." She laid it out methodically, the way she did everything. No dramatics, no appeals for sympathy, just the sequence of events in the order they had occurred. Grant Harrington had joined the company's executive team 3 years ago, positioned by their father's remaining board allies as a modernizing influence. Evelyn had not trusted him from the beginning, but she had no grounds to act on instinct alone. She had watched him carefully and found nothing, because what he was building was not visible in the places she knew to look. The falsified reports had been constructed over 18 months. Shipping manifests adjusted in the logistics database to show losses that hadn't happened. Financial summaries altered before they reached the board. The restructuring, the 300 terminations that had made Evelyn's name synonymous with corporate ruthlessness, had been based on projections she now knew had been deliberately inflated to make insolvency look imminent when it wasn't. Grant had needed the restructuring to happen. A company that had just shed 300 employees was under media scrutiny, and had a CEO whose public image had been systematically destroyed, was worth significantly less on paper. Less value meant a lower acquisition price. Grant had a buyer lined up, a competitor who had been trying to acquire Harrington Logistics for a decade and who had, Evelyn had recently learned, been having private conversations with Grant for the better part of 2 years. The financial scandal Grant had manufactured was the final piece. It gave the board a reason to remove Evelyn cleanly, without a prolonged fight, and hand operational control to him in the interim period before the sale. "The board received the preliminary findings 3 weeks ago," Evelyn said. "They're calling it misappropriation of operating funds. The paper trail leads directly to decisions I signed off on because I signed off on them based on numbers I was given by Grant's team." She set down her coffee cup. "I didn't come here to hide. I came here because this house belonged to my mother, and it's the only place I could think clearly without someone watching me do it." Darius was quiet for a long moment. "The records," he said, "the dispatch logs from the Q3 and Q4 periods. I flagged inconsistencies in the routing data twice. Both times I was told it was a system error and the files were updated. I know. Those original files would show the manipulation. I know that too. She looked at him steadily. Do you still have them? He had sent himself copies by email 2 years ago, troubleshooting what he'd thought was a database sync issue. He had never deleted the emails. He hadn't thought to. They had seemed like mundane, technical records at the time, the kind of thing you kept in case a question came up later. A question had come up. Yes, he said. I still have them. He went home and did not sleep. He lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and turned over everything Evelyn had told him, testing it the way you test weight-bearing structures, looking for the place where it would give way if the load was too much. He found nothing that broke. The story held. More than that, it connected to things he had noticed and filed away and never been able to fully explain. The routing anomalies, the sudden acceleration of the restructuring timeline, the way certain reports had come through Grant's office already summarized rather than in their raw form. He had known something was wrong. He had not known what or who. Now the cost of knowing presented itself clearly. If he came forward with the emails, he was walking back into the exact world he had left Lake Mercer to escape. He would be a witness, possibly a target, certainly a complication. His name would be in the press. His history with the company would be examined. Maya's life here, the quiet, the lake, the school she had just started to like, would be disrupted. If he stayed quiet, a woman who had been wronged would face a board hearing alone, with insufficient evidence, and lose. He thought about what he had told Maya on the porch steps the morning they arrived. Showing up isn't just about being in the room. It's about doing the right thing when it costs you something. He hadn't actually said that out loud, but he had meant to. He had been meaning to for years. He got up, made coffee, and opened his email. Maya figured it out on her own. Darius hadn't told her everything. He had told her enough. The night after the fair, sitting at the kitchen table with the overhead light on and his hands folded in front of him the way he sat when he was being serious. He told her that Evelyn was in trouble, that the trouble wasn't her fault, and that he had information that might help her. He told her he was still deciding what to do. Maya had listened without interrupting, which was how he knew she understood the weight of it. "Why are you still deciding?" she asked when he finished. "Because getting involved has consequences," he said, "for both of us." She thought about this. "But not getting involved also has consequences." He looked at his daughter. "Yeah," he said, "it does." She nodded slowly, in the way she nodded when she was filing something away rather than responding to it, and went to bed. What Darius did not know was that Maya had already been doing her own version of showing up. She had started going over to Evelyn's in the late afternoons, ostensibly to work on a follow-up project for school, but mostly, Darius suspected, because she had decided Evelyn needed the company and was not going to wait for an adult to make that decision officially. He had stopped objecting after the third time. There was no point. One afternoon he came to the porch to call Maya in for dinner and found the two of them sitting on Evelyn's steps, not talking, both looking out at the tree line. Maya had her sketchbook open on her knees. Evelyn had a cup of coffee going cold in her hand. "She said you used to do this," Maya told him when she came inside. "Just sit outside and not do anything. She said she forgot what it felt like." "She told you that?" "She tells me stuff sometimes." Maya set her sketchbook on the counter. "I think it's because I don't have opinions about her job." Darius almost smiled. He didn't, but almost. It was Maya who said the thing that mattered. She said it on a Thursday evening, quietly, while Evelyn was helping her label a diagram for her science homework. Darius was in the next room and heard it through the open doorway. "You don't have to be strong by yourself all the time," Maya said. "My dad thought that too. He thought if he just kept working really hard and didn't ask for anything, everything would be okay." A pause. The sound of a pencil on paper. "It wasn't okay. He almost lost me and he didn't even notice until it was almost too late." Silence from Evelyn. "I'm not saying you're like him," Maya added. "You're different, but the being strong by yourself part is the same." Darius stood very still in the next room. He heard Evelyn set down her coffee cup. When she spoke, her voice was slightly different from its usual register, quieter, stripped of its professional surface. "How did he fix it?" "He stopped," Maya said simply. "He just stopped and came home." Grant Harrington arrived on a Friday. Darius saw the car first, a silver sedan, rental plates, moving too slowly down the street for someone who knew where they were going. It parked in front of Evelyn's house at 2 in the afternoon. The man who stepped out was younger than Darius had expected, mid-30s, with the easy posture of someone who had never had to think too hard about how he came across. He was dressed casually, deliberately casually, the way that powerful people dress down when they want to seem approachable. Darius was replacing a section of fence boards on his side of the property line. He kept working. Grant knocked. Evelyn opened the door, and her face did a thing that Darius caught from 30 feet away. A tightening, controlled immediately, replaced with the measured expression she used as a default. They spoke on the porch for several minutes. Darius could not hear the words, but he could read the shape of the conversation. Grant's posture loose and reasonable, Evelyn's increasingly rigid, the slight tilt of her chin that he had come to recognize as her version of holding the line. Then Grant reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the porch railing between them. Evelyn looked at the envelope. She did not pick it up. After a long moment, she picked it up and handed it back to him. Grant took it with a small, patient smile that made something tighten in Darius's chest. He was walking back to his car when he paused at the edge of the driveway, just long enough to turn and look directly at Darius across the fence line. The look lasted 2 seconds. It said everything it needed to say without requiring words. Then he got in the car and drove away. Darius set down his hammer and stood there for a moment, looking at the space where the car had been. He thought about Roger Tillis, a friend from his years on the operations team who had retired 2 years before the restructuring and now did private fleet consulting in the region. A man who still had contacts in the dispatch network, people who knew people, the informal web of relationships that kept things running beneath the official structure. He went inside, found his phone, and opened the email account where the old dispatch records were stored. He forwarded them to his personal attorney with 3 lines of context and a request for a callback before end of day. The attorney called back within the hour. Her name was Patricia Owens, and she had handled Darius's affairs since the year after Renee died, his mother's will, the apartment lease disputes, the one time a Harrington Logistics subcontractor had tried to make him personally liable for a routing error that wasn't his. She was methodical and direct, and did not waste words, which was why he trusted her. She listened to everything he said without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for 3 seconds. "These records, if they're what you're describing, are significant," she said. "I need to see them before I can tell you how significant. But if the original routing data shows deliberate manipulation and can be cross-referenced against the altered versions in the company's current system, you're looking at material evidence of fraud." "What's the timeline?" "The board hearing is in 11 days. That's tight, but workable. I'll need the files tonight, and I'll need you available for questions through the weekend." He sent her the files that evening. She confirmed receipt at 10:47 and told him she would be in touch by Sunday. Saturday passed quietly. Darius fixed the last of the fence, took Maya to the farmer's market at the center of town, made dinner. He did not tell Evelyn about Patricia Owens yet. He wanted something concrete before he raised her hopes. He had seen enough of what disappointment looked like on Evelyn's face to not want to add to it unnecessarily. Sunday morning, he woke at 5:15 by habit, made coffee, and went to the front door. The lock had been forced. It took him several seconds to process what he was seeing. The door was closed but not latched. It swung slightly inward when he touched it, the lock mechanism visibly damaged. He stepped back immediately and checked the house room by room, quickly, methodically. Maya's room first. She was asleep, undisturbed. He exhaled. The rest of the house had not been searched, or, if it had, whoever had come through had known exactly what they were looking for and where to find it. Darius's desk in the back room was the only thing that had been touched. The external hard drive he kept there, a backup drive he used for personal documents, tax records, the kind of household files that accumulate over years, was gone. The dispatch records had been on that drive. He stood in the back room for a long moment, very still. Then he remembered the email. He went to his phone and checked. The forwarded files were still in his sent folder, still in Patricia's inbox. She had confirmed receipt, which meant they existed somewhere outside this house. He called her immediately, explained what had happened, told her not to open the files on any device connected to the firm's main network until he understood the scope of what he was dealing with. She told him she had already printed hard copies on Friday night. Old habit, she said. He had never been more grateful for an old habit in his life. The story broke on Monday morning. He found out the way everyone found out. His phone, notifications arriving in clusters, his name attached to a headline that took him 3 readings to fully absorb. Former Harrington logistics manager allegedly conspired with ousted CEO in extortion scheme. The article was sourced anonymously. It described Darius as a disgruntled ex-employee who had approached Evelyn Harrington with falsified records in exchange for financial compensation. It named Lake Mercer. It named the street. By 9 o'clock, there was a news van parked at the end of the road. Maya's school called at 9:40. A reporter had approached 2 parents in the pickup line asking questions about a child named Maya Cole. The principal wanted Darius to be aware. He picked Maya up himself immediately. She came out of the school building with her backpack clutched in front of her with both hands and got into the car without saying anything. He drove them home the long way, looping around the back roads to avoid the van. When they got inside, Maya sat down at the kitchen table and looked at her hands. "Is it because of Evelyn?" she asked. "Yes." She nodded. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said in a voice that was very careful and very tired, "I wish we hadn't come back here." It was the opposite of everything she had said when they arrived. It landed in his chest like something structural giving way. He sat down across from her and started to speak, and she shook her head. "Not right now, Dad," she said. "I just needed to be quiet for a little while." He sat with her in the quiet. That evening, he found a letter on his porch. Evelyn's handwriting on the envelope. Precise, controlled, the letters of someone who had learned penmanship formally. Inside, a single page. "You were right to leave. I had no right to pull you back into this. I'm sorry for what this has cost you and Maya. Take care of her. E." He read it twice. Then he looked out the window at the house next door. Dark. Empty. She was already gone. He gave himself one night. That was the rule he set, sitting alone at the kitchen table after Maya had gone to bed. One night to feel the full weight of it, to sit with the broken lock and the empty house next door and the headlines still open on his phone, and not try to fix anything. One night to be a man who had tried to do the right thing and had gotten his daughter's name in the news for it. He used the night well. He felt all of it. In the morning, he made breakfast. Maya came downstairs and sat across from him, and they ate without talking for a while, the way they had learned to eat in the early years after Renee died. Not silence as absence, but silence as a thing shared between 2 people who trusted each other enough not to fill it. Then Darius set down his fork and told her everything. Not the version he had been editing for her protection. All of it. Grant, the falsified records, the board hearing, Patricia Owens, the hard drive, the emails he had forwarded that still existed and still mattered. He told her about the night Evelyn had sat at this same table and laid out the truth plainly, and what it had cost her to do that. He told her he had been wrong to keep her at the edges of it, that he had been doing the thing he always did, trying to absorb everything himself so she wouldn't have to carry any of it. Maya listened with her hands flat on the table. "She left because of us," she said when he finished. "She left because she thought it was the right thing to do." Was it? Darius was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "It was the scared thing. The right thing and the scared thing look the same from the inside sometimes." Maya considered this. Then she said, "Before the house got broken into, the morning before." I saw a truck parked outside. He looked at her. It said Morrison Electrical on the side, but the logo was crooked, like it had been put on over something else. She traced a shape on the table with one finger. I thought it was weird, but I didn't say anything because I didn't think it mattered. It mattered. Darius called Roger Tillis, the friend from his years on the operations team he had been thinking about since Grant's visit, a man who had retired from Harrington Logistics 2 years before the restructuring and now did private fleet consulting in the region. Roger still had contacts in the dispatch network, people who knew people, the informal web of relationships that kept logistics operations running beneath the official structure. Roger made 4 calls. By early afternoon, he had a name. The truck had been rented under a shell account linked to a property management company that shared a registered address with a holding company whose board of directors included, as its secretary, a man named Daniel Marsh, Grant Harrington's personal assistant for the past 6 years. Darius relayed this to Patricia Owens, who combined it with the printed records she already had and spent the next several days building the evidentiary timeline. The Morrison Electrical truck placed Grant's representative at the scene before the break-in. The forwarded emails established that the original dispatch data existed and had been in Darius's possession prior to the theft. The printed copies were clean, time-stamped, and untampered. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. He found Evelyn at a roadside motel 40 minutes outside Lake Mercer. Patricia had located her through the attorney Evelyn had retained for the board hearing, a procedural contact, 2 phone calls, the kind of thing that happened when lawyers needed to coordinate. Darius drove out on a Wednesday morning, 1 week before the hearing, and knocked on the door of room 11. She opened it in the same plain sweater she'd been wearing the night she told him the truth. She looked at him without surprise, which meant she had been told he was coming and had chosen not to leave before he arrived. He took that as a good sign. He came inside and sat in the chair by the window. She sat on the edge of the bed. The room was anonymous and fluorescent and smelled like institutional carpet cleaner, and in it, Evelyn Harrington looked less like a CEO than he had ever seen her. I have the records, he said. Patricia has everything she needs. You're not walking into that hearing alone. Evelyn nodded slowly. Darius. I'm not finished. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You left because you thought you were protecting us. I understand that. But that's not what it was. You left because it was easier than staying and letting someone actually be in your corner. And I think you've been doing that your whole life, and I think you're tired of it, even if you won't say so. She looked at him for a long time. I don't know how to let people stay, she said finally. Everyone who's ever been close to me has had a reason. Grant was family, and he did what he did. The board supported me when I was profitable. She stopped. I don't know what it looks like when it's real. It looks like this, Darius said. Somebody shows up to a motel room 1 week before the most important meeting of your life and tells you they're not going anywhere. That's what it looks like. The room was very quiet. I'm scared, she said, plainly without apology. The most unguarded thing he had ever heard her say. I know, he said. Come home anyway. The board hearing convened at 9 in the morning on a Thursday. Darius walked in with Evelyn and sat 3 rows behind her, beside Patricia Owens. Grant Harrington was already seated at the far end of the executive table, composed and unhurried, the picture of a man who believed the outcome was settled. It was settled, just not the way he believed. Patricia presented the records in sequence. The original dispatch data showing the routing manipulations, the altered versions currently in the company system, the timestamps establishing the sequence of changes, and the documentation linking Grant's assistant to the theft of the backup drive. She presented it without theater, fact following fact, the way evidence works when it doesn't need help. Grant's attorney objected twice. Both objections were overruled. Grant himself said very little. Darius watched his composure erode in increments, not collapsing but losing detail, the fine surface work going first until what was underneath became visible. By the time Patricia finished, Grant looked like a man doing arithmetic he didn't like the answer to. The board chair called a recess at 11:15. When they reconvened 40 minutes later, Grant Harrington was asked to surrender his access credentials pending a full investigation. Evelyn's suspension was formally rescinded. In the corridor afterward, Marcus Webb found Darius. He didn't say much. He extended his hand and Darius shook it, and that was sufficient. Some things don't require a lot of words when the right ones have already been said. Evelyn stood a few feet away speaking with her attorney, and Darius watched her absorb the result with characteristic quietness. No visible relief, no triumph, just a slight easing in the set of her shoulders, as if she had been holding something at a fixed height for a very long time and had finally been allowed to set it down. She looked over at him once, briefly. He nodded. She nodded back. Evelyn did not return to Harrington Logistics the way she had left it. She announced the restructuring of the board at a press conference 2 weeks after the hearing. Not a defensive statement, not a PR exercise, but a plain account of what had happened and what would change because of it. A worker representation council would be established with binding input on operational decisions. The employees affected by the previous restructuring would be contacted individually and offered reinstatement where positions existed, with back pay assessments under review. An independent ethics committee would be seated within 60 days. The press asked if she was doing this to rehabilitate her image. She said she was doing it because it was correct, and because 312 people had paid for a mistake that wasn't theirs to pay for, and that no amount of image rehabilitation was going to change that arithmetic. She said it without apology and without performance, in the direct tone she used when she meant exactly what she was saying and nothing more. She asked Darius formally, in a letter delivered to the Lake Mercer house, whether he would consider serving as an independent consultant for the Employee Restoration Program. The letter was 3 paragraphs. The first outlined the scope of the role. The second addressed compensation and time commitment, specifying explicitly that the position was designed around school year hours and could be conducted primarily remotely. The third paragraph was shorter than the other 2. I'm asking because you're the right person for it, and because I've learned recently to ask for what I actually need instead of managing without it. You told me once that you weren't my employee anymore. This would not make you my employee. I don't want that. I want someone who will tell me when I'm wrong. You've been doing that since the night I arrived. I'd rather it be official. Darius read the letter at the kitchen table while Maya ate cereal across from him. When he set it down, she looked at the expression on his face with the precision of a child who has spent years reading her father's emotional weather. You're going to say yes, she said. I haven't decided yet. You have the face you make when you've decided and you're just making sure. She poured more cereal. It's the same face you made when you decided to come back here. He looked at his daughter for a moment. The condition, he said, is that it doesn't take me away from this place. From you. I know, she said. Tell her that. He wrote back that afternoon. 2 conditions, school year hours, and he reserved the right to end the arrangement if it started to look like the old life reassembling itself around him. Evelyn replied within the hour. Agreed to both. Thank you. The Lake Mercer Summer Festival fell on a Saturday in late July. It was smaller than the Harvest Fair. A stage at the park, food from the local restaurants, families spread across the grass with blankets and lawn chairs. Darius and Maya arrived early and claimed a spot near the oak tree at the far edge of the park, close enough to hear the music but far enough back to have space around them. Evelyn arrived 20 minutes later with a blanket of her own and a container of food she had clearly bought rather than made because her cooking had improved over the past months, but not that much. And she had accepted this about herself with the same equanimity she brought to most things once she decided to stop fighting them. She spread her blanket next to theirs without asking, which was new. 6 months ago, she would have positioned herself at a careful distance and waited for an invitation. Darius noticed the difference and said nothing about it, because some things were better acknowledged by letting them continue than by naming them. Maya presented the sign after dinner. She had made it on a piece of wood from the fence repair pile, painted white, the letters done carefully in black. She had clearly been planning it for a while. No CEOs beyond this point, only neighbors. Evelyn read it. A laugh escaped her, short and genuine, slightly surprised. The laugh of someone who is still getting used to the fact that they are allowed to find things funny. It changed her face entirely. Darius looked at her when she laughed, and she caught him looking, and neither of them looked away immediately. Later, when the music had slowed and Maya had fallen half asleep against Darius's shoulder, Evelyn reached over in the dark and found his hand. Not dramatically, not as a declaration, the way you reach for something you have decided to stop pretending you don't want. He turned his hand over and held hers. The lake caught the last of the evening light and threw it back in pieces across the water, and the three of them sat there together. A man who had stopped running, a woman who had learned to stay, and a girl who had known all along that this was where they were supposed to end up. The house behind them had its lights on. It looked for the first time in years like someone lived there. Darius didn't quit his job because he stopped caring about work. He quit because he finally understood what the work was supposed to be for. Evelyn didn't lose her company because she was cold or ruthless. She almost lost it because she had forgotten that trusting people, really trusting them, is not a weakness. It's the only way anything real gets built. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting harder. It's stopping long enough to let someone hand you a blanket in the cold. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about the choices that matter, the moments that change people, and the quiet kind of courage that doesn't make headlines, but changes everything. We'll see you in the next one.